100%. And on that note of it's not me, it's us, I'd like to bring Brandon back on from earlier in the show. If you missed it, Brandon is also known as a BS Opinion. He's been a frequent visitor in chat, and he looked like he had a lot of different things to say on. So we're covering anything that came up during the show or just recently with Adair. So feel free, get in here. I want to have a conversation. Make sure you unmute yourself.
I have got to push back against what you just said. Okay. I can't. The biggest problem with the two-party system itself is that it denies the plurality of liberal ideology. You can't have a vague conglomeration of, oh, these people are liberal and these people are conservative, because the liberal ideology, it ranges from anarchist to socialist to communist. There are so many different types of liberalism. And that is the problem we're seeing right now, is that our system has become an oppositional one. The only thing that unifies Democrats is their hatred of Republicans, and the only thing that unifies Republicans is their hatred of liberals, or what people assume to be liberals. And I would argue that a large part of what unifies Sanders' followers is understanding that the establishment is only in favor of that. And so it's less about socialism. I'm also a socialist, but a big unifying factor for Sanders supporters is the anti-establishment. They're like the notion that this game is rigged.
I would disagree. I have to heartily disagree that one of the biggest unifying characteristics is this idea that the system itself is rigged. Now, mind you, I absolutely agree with you on the two-party system. That's horrible. But what I'm saying is here, Sanders, the independent socialist from tiny, tiny Vermont way up, which is essentially Canada. That's really what Vermont is at this point, is essentially part of Canada, has brought together such an amazingly diverse group of people to bring them into this kind of political fold. Now, personally, I would love that if he drops out, I would love all of us to take that little step just a bit further to the left and vote for Jill Stein in 2016. I think this is the year, especially with what Sanders has done, that a third-party challenger has a real shot at the White House for the first time in a very long time. I think that if Bernie was to run as an independent, he could win enough of the vote to make it in and to make it challenging. There's a lot of scare tactics that have been going on, and there's a lot of this ideology that, well, you have to pick one or the other. You see it with MSNBC, you see it with CNN, you see it even with some of the more smaller sites like Raw Story, which is where I get a lot of my news from. You see it especially with Fox News, this whole idea that if you have a third-party challenger who steals just enough of the vote, we're going to leave this in the hands of the overwhelmingly conservative House. But let's look at the House. You've got Tea Partiers, you've got establishment, you've got Christian ideologists, you've got all these different groups of conservatives rallying around one cry. So, I mean, absolutely, do I think it's ridiculous? Yes, but do I think it's possible that we find these common threads in our ideas of what liberalism is, and we work together? I think that is what Sanders has really been about. That's what he's done better than Obama did in 2012 and 2008, than what Bill Clinton did, much better than what Gore did. You know, I think he's made a lasting mark on who we are as liberals. And I think that if he was to make an independent challenge, a lot of us would vote for him, and that might help to change the status quo. And I think those of us that absolutely refuse to vote for Hillary should vote for Jill Stein if he drops out and chooses not to run for president as an independent. She fits the mold. She's the same kind of candidate, and she has a real shot at winning if Bernie decides not to run. We just have to stick together. There's this saying that getting liberals together is like herding cats. We're not very good at coming together. But I think this year we kind of proved that wrong.
Well, I would respond to that by saying what I think Sanders did better than anything else was destabilize this narrative of liberal unity. Destabilize the idea that as liberals we are all in favor of the exact same thing, and we have to be in favor of the exact same thing. That there's a plurality of black liberals, white liberals, rich liberals, poor liberals, and what he has done is challenge the mainstream MSNBC Clinton version of liberalism. That is, well, you know, pander, 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 uh,
Positive.
and like that is the value here, to understand, to challenge the idea that these people, the Clintons, the Rachel Maddows, the Lawrence O'Donnells, the Joe Scarboroughs, are
Don't mention them.
are capable of defining liberalism for everybody. Like they
Right.
are capable because their experiences are not the experiences of everybody. And the broad coalition you speak of are all just seeking to get their voices into that.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think we do need to unify, and we need to reject. What we're rejecting is not necessarily uh, Clinton, but we're rejecting the notion that we can have a single definition for an ideology. Like that is what we need to reject. That we can exist as a plural society. We can exist as a multi-party state that has socialists represented, that has libertarians represented, and we can come together and share experiences. We can have a more diverse political system that's not particularly motivated simply by antagonism.
But what about, so here's what I'm saying, and I agree with you, but here's my point, that no matter how you define your liberalism, that I and the anarchist have, at some point, we have a common goal. We have a common thread that unites us as liberals. One of those that I would posit that we have as a shared thread, however you identify as a liberal, is this idea of equity. I, as the socialist, my friend the anarchist, my friend the libertarian, we all have this idea of equity. And it brings us together. We might not always agree on everything, and that is exactly as it should be. I fear the day when we no longer are able to disagree with one another. That day is the day that I leave this country. Because that is the day that we've given up our individualism. No, I wouldn't say individualism. I'm very much a collectivist. That's me as a socialist. But I would say the day we stop disagreeing is the day that things start going bad. The day people stop disagreeing is the day we let evil kind of take over. Because nobody stops to think anymore. But while we disagree, we should always find what connects us. We should always keep that at the forefront. Keep our disagreements there, absolutely. But remember, we have shared experiences. We have shared wants. We have this idea of equity. We have this idea of justice. And I think a lot of us would define it, if not the same, rather similar. And I think that can bring us together. And that is what will give us a voice in politics. That disenfranchisement, this idea that, well, my vote doesn't matter. I think Bernie's challenged that, and he's done so by pulling at threads that connect us all together and saying, hey, look, you're not so different, communists and capitalists, anarchists, and, I wouldn't say totalitarian, but, someone who's a little bit more authoritarian than an anarchist is. He's pulled these threads and said, we're a big group. We just have small differences here and there in how we label ourselves.
I mean, I would agree, but at the same time, I would say liberals are not distinct from conservatives, true conservatives, not Republican,
Right.
Trump conservatives, in that part of being, in favor of a society itself is, being in favor of equity. It just depends on how you define equality. How do you define equity? How do you, like you said, how do you get the path you take to get there? What is a legitimate path towards equality within society? But more than that, I would say people are coalescing around, not only, I hate to do it, but compare Bernie Sanders to Trump. People are coalescing around these people because they realize their voices are not being heard within the system. That there is a domination of these terms, conservative and liberal, by the establishment, by the rich establishment, who does not, who are defining conservative and liberalism by rich conservatism. So whether you're talking about the Ku Klux Klan believing that their voice is not heard in the modern electoral process, or you're talking about democratic socialists or anarcho-feminists, which it's the same sort of feeling of disenfranchisement with the system itself. You see what I'm saying? That people are coalescing around these anti-establishment candidates because they realize that the establishment does not represent their voice.
That's a fair point to make, but I would argue still, though, that the terminology liberal and conservative is not a problem in and of itself. I think those are useful descriptors. I describe myself a number of ways. I describe myself as a liberal, as a socialist, as a scientist, as a student, as a brother, as a son, as a partner, right? I have these different labels that in some cases are, you know, kind of are controlled by very few. I, for the lack of a better term, we'll call them groups, societal groups, right? However, that doesn't mean the terms themselves are invaluable. The term conservative is very much valuable if you feel that you are socially, fiscally, however you define conservative as conservative. Our problem lies in this two-party conglomerate that we have, this oligarchy of wealthy elitists who are saying, well, this is what liberal actually means. Well, this is what conservative actually is, and now we want you two to fight it out. That is a problem. That is a huge problem. That is one of the things that Sanders, and I think only Sanders, has really addressed. I would say that Trump is a populist, but he's very much a demagogue and out and out racist. And that's really where he's resonating more so than anywhere else, is with the racists in this country, because they can be open about it now. They have a surrogate. Whereas we as liberals can rally around Sanders because he represents the how liberalism is multifaceted. But I think even still that this year is a good year to be liberal, because I think this year we can have a legitimate third-party challenger, and we can kind of inject our own voice into this. And I think it's good for conservatives too, on that same level, because for once they can say, well, I'm going to vote third party, and I don't care if it's, you know, going to ruin our party's chances at winning in the national election. Why does it have to be your party? Why can we not have more than one? Why do we only give the power to determine what liberal and conservative are to this oligarchical society that we have no real power, no real part of, no real power in? I think that is something that has been really, really brought to the forefront in this election cycle, at least.
No, I agree, but I think at the same time you see a lot of resistance among both Bernie Sanders supporters and Hillary Clinton supporters to this notion that there can be two liberalism, that there can be both socialism and neoliberal corporatist version of progressivism. I don't know what she would describe it as. I can't. That's not my thing. And they can coexist, and they can have open and respectful discourse and agree to disagree, or not agree to disagree, but necessarily acknowledge the worth of the other person's existence and opinion. And so, from my perspective, as a socialist, as a democratic socialist, as a feminist, as an anti-racist, these ideologies, they mean things to me personally, and I conceptualize them in my own head and amongst my own social circle in one way. But I can't say that because we're both liberals, we agree on the same thing. I recognize that that label most of the time is less helpful than it might actually appear to be on the surface. Because if we sit down and talk about politics, even though we're both socialists, we probably disagree on what constitutes real socialism. Although I can accept that there is no real socialism, there is no real feminism, there is no real liberalism, and I think, you know, we can try to square that circle. But unfortunately, society at large has not gotten to the point where they can say, okay, well, you're a Sanders supporter and I'm a Hillary Clinton supporter, but we're both liberals. It's now gotten to the point where it's like, you're just fake. You're a fake liberal. You're a fake feminist. You're a bro. You're a racist. You're this and you're that. And we exist on a dichotomy.
I think you bring up a very interesting and important point about how identity politics has taken a very sharp turn in this election, and that Trump is definitely feeding into it. And we saw that Hillary's campaign, in order to try and beat uh, uh, Bernie, was feeding into this idea that, you know, reducing everybody to an identity and then only making them fit when you want them to fit. So, you know, Bernie supporters are all young white males, yet, you know, here we all are. And, you know, and I mean, I know Adair saw, I know at our caucus, one of the things, and at the conventions, it allowed us to see a wide variety of Bernie supporters. And as far as Bernie or bust goes, I think the three of us probably have a much more nuanced conversation on it than a lot of people do. A lot of people, many of the older people that were there were just like, you know, a lot of expletives, and I'm not going, I'm not, you know, I'm not going to vote for her and stuff like that. And so, like, the perspective that we're presenting, I think, is actually the more nuanced. So despite what the narrative out there is that Bernie or bust is just a bunch of young college kids that are really loud on Twitter and Reddit, it really, the people that are not on board with Hillary, and not just from a petty identity politics perspective of that, that they're sexist and that they just don't trust a woman to be, and that they want to get in the way of the first one. None of that. It's about, like, I mean, and Adair can attest to this, that the stories that were told when he was elected to be a national delegate, several of them were heart-wrenching stories that brought tears to several people's eyes because of the personal relationship that people had with the damage that has been done both by Hillary, the policies that she's advocated, the Bill Clinton's administration, and the neoliberal agenda at large, and that she doesn't see the problems with it that those people conveyed to me through emotion and through real life stories about U.S. planes dropping bombs near the hospital where their father works, and what that feels like, and being able to try and just try to get that empathic link. That I don't see any of that from Hillary, and when I saw what happened with Ashley Williams when she confronted her about the super predator comments, and what I've seen in several other incidences when she's been confronted, there was another woman it was like a coffee shop or something that confronted her, and she was very dismissive. And she went later on to talk about on Morning Joe how she had multiple answers to what Ashley Williams said, and she gave one to Jonathan Capehart to go cape for her in Washington Post, gave another one to Joe and Mika for the white Morning Joe audience, and gave another answer to another group of people. And so that dispassionate, it seems, I don't want to get into labeling or doing things in psychological or anything, but it seems sociopathic tendencies to me. It seems that it's hard for me to imagine being able to know that those things are going on and not empathize. I suppose at that level of leadership, you're overseeing and responsible for such just a loss of human life on a day-to-day basis, no matter what decisions you make. That with either decision that you make in a given situation, you've already been put into a situation where either decision is going to end up with people dead, and it's just a matter of which people and how many, and that you have to make those. So maybe that's part of the dehumanization, and that she's been heavily engaged in that kind of interaction for 20 plus years. Maybe that's part of it. And because, I mean, a lot of people make a good case that, seems like sometimes she really wants to do the right thing and fights some fights, although most of the time it looks like it's the most politically advantageous thing for her to do at the time. She has done some good things throughout her long history in politics, although many of the ones that she likes to tout have a lot of negative consequences. Go ahead and get in there, Brandon.
Well, I mean, politics are myopic. Our personal politics are defined by the things that we see around us. That's why we should read books and watch the news, so we can expand what we see around us, so it can influence our worldview. Hillary Clinton lives in a establishment elite bubble. I don't know if she's a true believer in neoliberalism. I don't know if she's faking it. It doesn't really matter to me, because why you do something sometimes is less important than you actually do something. And just to speak to identity politics for a second, I mean, you call it that, but I don't necessarily have a problem with identity politics as it works in a diverse, open system that engages with every aspect of someone's identity. So basically, intersectional identity politics. But the problem we have here is that we are treating Hillary Clinton as though she is the representation of every woman ever, that she has the ability to speak for every woman ever, that she is looking out for every woman ever, and that her actions have never had any effect or negative on women of color, Muslim women in the country, people like Libya. Just, it's the monolithic notion of identity, that as a woman, you are able to speak for all women, or as a black person, you are able to speak for all black people, with no regard to the other identities you embody. So your class, your sexuality, anything like that. So as we give people,
I was just going to say that's an excellent, important distinction to make, and I'm glad that you made that, and I totally agree with that. And or go ahead and finish your point. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Oh, I mean, so basically we give people carte blanche if they embody any kind of identity that is not white Christian male, to say things that are not racially sensitive, that are not gender sensitive, whatever you want to call it, and not we say non-PC things, I guess. So where you can have Hillary Clinton talking down to a black woman about super predator comments. You can have her make a CP time joke, but people are resistant to calling her a racist. That sort of word never gets thrown around when it comes to engaging with Hillary Clinton's past. People are very quick to label Donald Trump a racist because he's a rich white male. Bernie Sanders a racist because he's a rich white male. But when it comes to Hillary Clinton, the notion that she might in fact be a racist due to her past is just it never comes up. It's never broached.
It is broached, I would argue, depending on depending on who's talking at the time. I consider Hillary Clinton to be racist based on her actions throughout her political career. The Goldwater campaign, I mean, can you work for a segregationist and not call yourself racist? That's question one. But question two, she makes several racially insensitive comments, said very racist things in general. I don't think there's a question as to whether or not she is racist. I think, though, that when we talk about identity politics, we have to keep things kind of in perspective. And I think I agree that identity politics are a good thing. I personally vote from my experiences, from my identity. Those are the things that have shaped who I am. I'm a mixed person. I'm black. I'm native. I'm Asian. These are part of who I am. So because these are part of who I am, because these are communities that I'm a part of, I see the way the different Clinton policies, Republican policies, Democrat policies affect these communities, and I vote based on that. But I do agree with you that we have this idea that if you are a member of an oppressed group, it gives you the right to speak to another oppressed group however you want. That lack of intersectionalism.
There was just an ad that I saw, and I didn't catch the whole thing, and I haven't had a chance to watch it again, so I apologize if I'm taking this out of context. But it looked like it was like a domestic violence / sexual assault ad, and it had Lena Dunham in it and a few other actresses. And the line that I don't know, it just seems so weird that maybe I dreamed this and this didn't actually happen, but this just reminded me of it, so I had to mention it. Is like, I think it was Lena at one point says during the commercial, this is something where 4 white women can actually be representative of the issue or whatever. And I was just like, wait a minute, wait, what? I don't know if anybody in our audience saw that ad, or if I did just completely dream that up. It's a very peculiar thing to dream up, but I don't know if I mentioned I'm on like a couple hours of sleep, so it's possible. But like, I'll look for that. I'll let you guys discuss it, and I'll look for it just to verify, see if I can come up with it. But that is just exactly to me what you're talking about.
It is. That's it exactly. That hits the nail on the head, where we erase experiences of people of color, of gender non-conforming people, of trans people, of disabled people, of these different groups in favor of the dominant. So in this case, white women in particular, they're an oppressed group, absolutely due to the patriarchy. But they are not representative of oppressed groups as a whole. But we tend to put those that look more like society's norm, right, as the face of the oppression that's going on. So here's a good example from my personal life.
Just so you know, before you get into it, we got just a few more minutes, and we're going to get Dave back in here in a moment to say some things. And so I'm going to let you go ahead and finish your thought, Adair, and then we're going to get you in, Brandon. And then we'll go to that'll also be, so tie your closing thoughts in with these comments, and then go ahead and get in there, Adair, and be quick for Brandon's sake, please.
Yeah. So, long story short, we're in class. This is a class on eugenics. Those of you who don't know should definitely look that up. It's very important. We were talking about the experience of power of disenfranchised groups with authorities or those in power in a society. Speaking as a black person, in my experiences with police being stopped, God, it's almost a daily thing because I matched the description. One person in class said, and a white woman in class in particular said, it's not just you people who get stopped. There's this idea that because, you're a member of an oppressed group, you suddenly are a part of every oppressed group, and you have the wherewithal to say whatever you want to them, which I think is something that we've really got to work on, is intersectionality. And I think that ties in, the idea of intersectionality at least, ties into a lot of what we've been talking about, what I'm doing as a delegate, what's going on down in California, identity politics. Everything I feel really comes back to this idea that we have to find the common ground in all of us so that way we can better work towards a more representative society.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and we'll come back to you, Adair, to make sure. Or yeah, we'll get back to you. But go ahead, Brandon, get in here real quick.
I'm gonna pretend like that commercial actually exists because I'm hoping you're making it up. But that just speaks to like Adair. So let me put it, the idea that we have to be wary of things that seem more progressive than they actually are. We have to be wary of when we put forth one oppressed group's narrative, how do other narratives that don't fit so cozily into the the way we value people, as a racist, white supremacist sort of male dominated society, the people who aren't necessarily as evaluated there. So when you talk about sexual violence, whether it be rape culture or any other sexual violence, the putting forth of certain narratives obscures other narratives. It makes it harder for people of color to come out. It makes it harder for people of trans women to come out. It makes it harder for victims of non-heteronormative rape to come out because they never see themselves represented in that story. And it makes an allegory of one victim and makes invisible other victims. Now that's not to say that it's not and very important that this commercial exists, but it is misleading. It is just misleading, and in being misleading, it might be antithetical to what it's designed for, which is to decrease sexual violence.
No, I think that's another great point. And so just to wrap up here, or just getting close to wrap up, I want to get Dave back in here. He's got some great information that he just wants to share with us as far as what we can find coming up with him and going on what he's going to be working on. So let me just get him queued up here. And then we'll have a little bit of time to just some quick parting words after Dave's done here. So just give me a moment.
While you're getting things set there, Adair, do you want to know a score, or are you watching?
Yes, please tell me the score.
2-2.
Ah!
Oh man, okay, Dare, thank you so much for staying focused on what we were doing. I'm surprised we were able to do that. Luckily, the TV must not be loud in the other room, or.
I'm about to put it on as soon as I'm done here. So.
All right, so on that note, and it's 2-2. I know how that goes. I'll let you go ahead and say goodbye real quick before we go to Dave, and we'll get you out of here. So.
But I just want to thank everybody. Thank you for having me. Thank everyone here for talking. It was always a wonderful conversation with everyone. Please, if you have any questions or want to get a hold of me, get at me on Twitter. It's at Adair Schmidt, ADAIR SCHMIDT. My Gmail is the same, ADAIR SCHMIDT. My GoFundMe is Send Adair to the DNCC. And Adair, again, is spelled ADAIR. All right, thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks, Adair, and I'll make sure to get that tweeted out, and maybe we'll be able to get it dropped in chat as well, so hopefully we can get you some any money we can get going there so that we can get this representative, my representative, in Philly out there. I would greatly appreciate your guys' help, and I'm sure Adair would too. Thank you so much for joining us. He'll be back with us, hopefully, in the near future to give us some more great insight. Thank you so much again, Adair. Yeah, about that.
Goodbye.
So... All right, and so now we will go to Dave, and so sorry about having you on screen there. There we go. There we go.
Of course, hilariously, the dog stopped barking as soon as I went off the air, and hasn't had a peep since. So
he was just mad about Hillary.
He'll start up again right away.
Like the whole point was he was trying to get his opinion expressed over the microphone.
Apparently. Just sort of tag on to what you guys were talking about, and just absorbing it and thinking about it. One of the things that my wife and I talk about with regards to certain types of men and how they behave with women, and it does take people from that community that are causing the problem to stand up and be allies and to speak out. And so big men need to stand up and say something about violence against women. Billionaires, like on Bill Maher the other night, the founder of Amazon, he totally supports the $15 minimum wage and believes that the narrative is complete BS that's been propagated for years. It takes rich people to get an electric car going. It takes Lyndon Johnson to step up and say, I'm going to work with Martin Luther King and get this done. Similarly, FDR came from an upper class and was basically, he was not, he was rich and he basically pushed a socialist agenda. So I think there needs to be, not only from the people that are affected the most by these policies, but there needs to be, some of the people in that hierarchy need to step up and start supporting the folks that have been screaming and yelling it for years and years. And I think it takes a coalition of all of those progressive voices, no matter what part they're from. But it takes somebody in the media to step up and talk about the media. Of course, they all of them get just hacked. But now we have the Progressive Army, and we have Benjamin Dixon, and we have other independent news sources where the views can get out. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point that it's really it's important to not just. I lost. I'm sorry. I'm trying to crush for time here. So go ahead and get your plugs in so we can get out to our moment of sanity.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, in about an hour, I'm probably going to be interviewing Lauren Steiner. She's on a conference call with poll workers in California, and we're going to get to the bottom of some of these 2 million votes that are being counted right now. So stay tuned for that. After Benjamin Dixon, I'll probably go on the air a little bit later if I can rein her in. Feel the Burn TV on YouTube, and at Feel the Burn TV Twitter. Follow me there. And great show, guys. Thanks for having me and making me a part of it.
Thank you so much for joining us, and I just want to thank everybody, all of our guests today, with Adair, Brandon, Dave, and thank you for the package you put together. Thank you, Brandon, for all the work you did getting that information on the Electoral College for us. And Adair, thank you for going to represent me. And thank you, Ben, for putting us on this platform. We can't thank you enough. Make sure to stay tuned. The link will be in chat. We lost a legend since between the last show and now. Muhammad Ali passed away, and there's been a lot of talk about a lot of things, and I think he has an amazing life. So if you're not really familiar with what he did beyond boxing, go check it out. And he had some words about how he wanted to be remembered, and I thought that would make a good closing for our moment of sanity today. So again, thank you all for joining us. Stay tuned for Ben. He'll be on in just a moment. And thanks again. You do this great, Project Sanity. And we are out momentarily. As soon as I figure this out. Oh, goodness. Got to put it in the right browser. That was so smooth, too. Oh, better luck next time. So here we go. I got it.
Just gets better and better.
Here we go. And we will go out with that. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Have a great night.